Okay, so hi, I'm Sebastienne Grant. I'm a doc student here at West Georgia. This is a project that I'm still working on, so it's a little bit half-baked. I would appreciate feedback since I'm still working on it. And I presented some of this at the Division 24 conference, but none of you were there, so it won't be redundant for you. So this is the role of psychology in the emerging transhuman subject. Transhumanism is something that I've been working on, thinking about for a while. So for those of you who aren't familiar, transhumanism is relating to technologies and philosophies advocating the use of science and technology to transcend current human limitations. And by transcend, I mean radically transcend. So to transcend human limitations radically beyond what we would ever be able to achieve without the aid of technology. So to increase, well, there's 4 domains: physiological, this is health, aging, and death. So to increase the lifespan by hundreds or thousands of years, to stop the aging process, to be able to regenerate our cells so that we don't fall prey to illness, things like this. But also, you know, to be able to get giant muscles and have morphological freedom and kind of be able to embody any body that we want. Cognitive enhancements, neural prosthetics, these are already being designed. Right now, they're sort of ameliorative, so neural prosthetics that would, for instance, replace some of the amygdala function, be able to help with short-term memory and things like this. But the technology is sort of moving in the direction of enhancement, enhanced memory, enhanced intellectual capacities. And then finally, digital integration, brain uploading, so we can upload our brains, live forever in a computer, or we could network our brains so that we could have direct access to one another's minds. Pretty interesting stuff, but also brings up some problems, some things that we don't know the consequences, right? Emotional personality, so this is stuff like enhanced capacity for positive emotions. So transhumanists are using primarily genetic engineering, nanotechnologies, and digital robotic technologies. Any of those can be applied to these issues. So one of the things that's talked about a lot is enhancing the capacity for positive emotions. So this doesn't mean just, you know, decreasing our melancholy days and enhancing our good days. It means enhancing our capacity for positive emotions hundreds or thousands of times over, while reducing or eliminating negative emotional experiences. Selected personality aspects, so introversion is one of the things that's often seen on the chopping block in transhumanism. Introversion is related to antisocial behavior, depression, all of these things that it's been linked to through psychological research. So why not just get rid of that, make everyone extroverted, be a better social world, right? I'm being facetious, if you guys know.
Thank you.
Yeah. I saw your eyes like, oh. And moral values. There's a lot of talk about neurotechnologically enhanced virtues. So one of the reasons this comes up is we're thinking about creating people with superhuman strengths, superhuman intelligences. People think maybe we should give them some superhuman morals, otherwise we're going to create supervillains. So there are...
we already did.
Yeah. So they're talking about looking at the sort of the neurology, the neurochemical makeup of morality, and trying to boost that. But also creating like algorithmic ethic bots that could be sort of hardwired into our brain that would make moral decisions for us, or at least not allow us to make decisions deemed as immoral with our superhuman powers. So this is some of the stuff that technology is, that transhumanism is taking up, and I always have to stress this stuff sounds like science fiction, but there's actually a lot of research, billions of dollars being poured in. Google is working on the Calico project, anti-aging, life extension technologies. There's a lot of progress happening in this field. So what I was trying to do is think about what transhumanism as these sort of the further reaches of technological progress can show us about what psychology is up to, what its kind of implicit values are right now, and then what psychology may be contributing unintentionally to the movement of transhumanism, because thus far theology's been really involved in the dialogue of transhumanism, philosophy, but psychology has been totally absent in this conversation. But my argument is that they're still contributing a lot to the movement, so maybe it would be good to get intentionally involved. And finally, do we, as psychologists, support this ultimate vision that we may be unintentionally contributing to? So, I'm talking about the emerging transhuman subject. First, I want to talk about the psychological subject as I see it, which is basically the subject that we have at the moment, heavily influenced by psychology. So, I think that the current modern subject, as a psychological subject, has an idea of individuality. I am an individual. I have an identity that's separate from other people. There's a sense of agency and changeability. So I can choose to be different than I am. I can choose how I want my life to be, and I can change that. I can make successful changes. It's a good thing. We're all happy about that. Not deterministic. Right to personal fulfillment. So I should be able to be fulfilled. I should be able to have success, actualization, happiness, the acquisition of desires, and freedom from suffering. And if I don't have those things, I'm going to keep searching, try to figure out. I'm going to get some self-help books, I'm going to go to therapy, I'm going to keep trying to figure this out. Monitors and controls self and looks to science and technology for help. So, you know, as a subject, if I'm not doing well, I'm like, oh, do I have anxiety issues? Do I have relationship issues? How am I going to deal with this? I need to seek out, and where do we go? We often go to psychology for answers and insight and guidance with how to deal with our struggles. Oh, sorry, this thing goes by itself sometimes. And finally, we are embedded in a network of norms and ideals. We've been embedded in a network of norms for a long time. Psychology has contributed to that. But we are progressively being embedded in a network of ideals. So it's no longer enough for us to be normal. We should be ideal, right? We should be self-actualized. We should be flourishing at the top of our game. We should be just rocking our human existence, which is a lot to live up to. The transhuman subject, I argue, is really an exaggerated psychological subject. And by this I mean the transhuman subject not as the subjectivity of a transhuman, which doesn't quite exist yet. Although people are becoming progressively more cyborgic. Just coined that word. But someone who is a proponent of transhumanism, who advocates for transhumanism, people who are working in the field of transhumanism, what's going on? Why are they fans? What are they up to? So for these people, I think, and there's probably a little bit of this in all of us. There's a huge emphasis on potential and desires. These are kind of a priority in the transhuman literature. That we have sort of an obligation to fulfill our potential and to obtain our desires, and that this is almost like a moral imperative. To free the mind, that we have a true self inside of us that's trapped by our human limitations, and we need to figure out how to annihilate those limitations so that we can embody our true selves. That the human is fundamentally flawed. So this I'm thinking about sort of pre-enlightenment, that the human is flawed and in need of divine salvation. And now we're kind of coming back to this idea of the human is flawed and in need of technological salvation. And this idea of creating utopian individuals, if we can somehow manipulate the makeup of the person, we can create a utopian society rather than the other way around. Which has been more of a sort of a critical psychology move, has been more to look at the societal factors. That transhumanism is really focusing on the individuals. If we can make individuals, you know, hardwired with moral bots, and we can make them happy, and we can do all of this, then we'd have a happy society. So just for fun, I looked at the APA's sort of statement of what it's up to. And it says, to use psychology for the benefit of society, improve people's lives, and advance health. Of course, we read this and we're like, yeah, that sounds great, right? It's all good stuff. But then you start thinking, like, what do we mean by terms like benefit and improve and health. We don't really break those down. And I'm arguing that psychology has really gone far beyond ameliorative, which is good, and humanistic psychology has played a huge part in this. You know, we've gone beyond just looking at problems. But the downside of that is that we've sort of problematized everything that's not ideal. So we're creating a proliferation of problems by saying, I'm not super happy every day. What's wrong with me? Now I've got a problem. Is it my emotions? Is it my personality? Is it my neurochemicals? Is it my relationships? Is it society? Why am I not kind of living this perfect promised life that I think psychology contributes to? Do I want to talk? Well, yeah, just a minute. So I think there's some implicit philosophical assumptions that guide psychology's what it's up to, including this idea of evolution and teleology, that we are uncovering a better way to be, that we're constantly moving toward a better place as humanity, individuals. We're figuring things out, getting better at this stuff. That science can be used to understand, predict, and control the material world, and that we're applying that science more and more to the human body and experience. Of course, the idea of individuality and self-fulfillment, which is a pretty sort of a Western idea. Not only, but a happiness imperative. We are supposed to be happy. That's what we're supposed to do. And again, this idea of norms in an ideal state of flourishing, so this sort of utopian ideal that we're striving for. And this one, I don't have time to talk about this. This is just some psychology behind psychology, so things that may be motivating the projects that psychology takes up that aren't always explicit. Things like borrowing from existential psychology, the fear of death, the need for meaning, fear of isolation, freedom and responsibility. Buddhist psychology and psychoanalytic psychology looking at the empty subject and lack that may be happening to the modern subject through consumerism and things like this. And capitalism, so there's an element of, with critical psych, there's an element of capitalism and power that influences the projects that psychology takes up. So, do we support the vision that we're contributing to? When we think about the projects that psychology is up to, taken to the fullest extreme, we're talking about ultimate control over human experience. Now, most psychologists would say that's not what we're up to. But by constantly looking for, uh-oh, there's a problem here, there's a problem here, there's a problem here. How can we fix this? How can we make it better? We're sort of setting the tone of, we should fix all of our problems. Now, I'm really addressing mainstream psychology here. There are definitely some more nuanced visions in this department, and I think that's awesome. I think that's why I love this department. And a lot of what we take up is based on these ideals of psychology. So depression is bad, introversion is problematic, we value intelligence, we value joy, things like this. Fundamental alterations to the human condition. So death makes us uncomfortable. Let's get rid of death, right? It's a problem to solve. We can get rid of it, and that's what is sort of being attempted at the moment with a lot of energy. Embodiment, so this would be like brain uploading. We don't have a body anymore. The body is problematic. If we upload our brains onto a non-biological substrate, we lose death, we lose aging, we lose illness, we lose human limitation. Multiplication and intensification of desires. We can and should feel anything desired, so transhumanism is really putting this idea out there. And kind of a perfection imperative. We are just having this idea of teleology moving toward a perfect being. This is my last one. So questions for psychologists. What experiences have value? I think as we get more and more power over the human conditions, we need to start thinking about, are there some things we want to keep? Do we want to keep embodiment? Does it have value even though it may be problematic? Do we want to keep sadness, the ability to feel sadness? Do we want to keep introversion? So things that are often problematized, I think we need to start looking for the value and saying maybe there's something here that is important for our human experience, even for joy or consciousness or these other things, love. Is it possible to understand and predict the consequences? And is it possible that the gains are worth the potential losses, risks? Who would have access? This is another big question. Who would have access to these and who wouldn't? And what would that do for societal relationships? And what values should be guiding technological progress as applied to the human? And who should be making these decisions and who should be making these values? That's it. Questions? Yeah.
Just a more of a rhetorical question. You know, you're talking about kind of eliminating all these negative emotions, sadness, stuff like that. And you know, I mean, here there was talking yesterday about the role of pain and suffering in our growth.
Right.
You know, I wonder what happens to our growth if we eliminate those things.
Absolutely.
They play a role in our learning about ourselves and about our role in the world. What happens to that?
Yeah.
And also, you know, you're talking about extending the lifetime to 1,000 years or more. It really makes me wonder what developmental theories would look like.
And see, these are exactly the kind of questions that are being brought up by philosophers, but so far not psychologists. You know, but I think in particular people in the humanistic psychology field have a lot to contribute to this conversation. So I'm on a bandwagon to get people involved in talking about it. Yeah.
If you don't mind sharing, I'm curious how you got into this topic.
I don't remember. I know that I was, I was looking for, I do remember. I was considering applying to some PhD programs, so this was like 4 years ago. And one of the I'd been reading Heidegger's The Question Concerning Technology for fun, which is why I thought I should go get a PhD. And I was really caught up with this question of why we choose certain paths of technological progress over others. Why are we investing energy into certain technologies like human enhancements and radical life extension over things like well-being, solving world hunger, sustainable energy, which a lot of people are doing. But there's a lot of energy being poured into this, right? So on the cover of all, I mean, now it's exploded, transhumanism. So I started thinking about what, where that energy was going right now, and I discovered transhumanism. I was like, whoa, yeah.
The idea to do this is not new. This is establishment psychology. Get rid of the bad stuff and feel good. Now we're just talking about the technology to do it.
And this is, in many ways, this is an extension of the eugenics movement. It's called modern eugenics, positively, because nobody has to die now. We can just manipulate people, you know, while gene editing, these kinds of things. But yeah, so I totally agree. And
I'm a Gestalt psychotherapist, so what we do is to be with what is, and that's how you move your life forward.
Yeah.
So if we don't have all of that, what happens?
Yeah. And
I mean, we know what happens if you try to get rid of it today.
Exactly.
What if you try to get rid of it through technology?
Yeah, totally eliminate it. That's,
I love all the stuff you're working on. It's great. I guess the question that I have regards the end, and so you start bringing up these questions, and of course these are really important questions to ask, but at some point it's going to be like too late to ask the questions.
Yeah.
So you kind of just have to develop tactics, and what are we going to do as a community that deal with these changes and not be either overwhelmed.
But it's not too late right now.
I mean, I guess the question is, can psychologists intervene on these processes that are ultimately economically viable for large corporations?
Well,
so I guess my question is, like, with regard to tactics, should we move towards resistance, or should we move towards integrating the technology in ways that aren't so dangerous? Or
yeah. So I think first of all, that my argument is that the transhuman movement is drawing heavily on psychological research and literature to figure out what to focus on. But psychology is not involved. So first of all, I think making sort of statements about the importance of these experiences that are so often problematized might be helpful. But the other thing is, you know, there's a difference between, there's sort of transhumanists and then there's techno-progressives in another camp, right? And techno-progressives are more interested in using technology to truly improve the human condition, but maybe in a more nuanced way, so not just trying to create a utopian world. And I think that there is possibility for psychologists to get involved in thinking about how can we really use technology to address certain things. Like, you know, there are like neuroprosthetics to help people who've had strokes and parts of their brains have been destroyed, or something like that. I mean, there's a lot of really cool stuff that technology could do. There's some really interesting stuff on using technology to increase the rate of meditation progress and enlightenment, which is really cool. I was on the fence for a while, but now I'm kind of on the,
There's an app for that.
Yeah, but I mean, it's getting more.
Right.
James Hughes, who's a Buddhist transhumanist, has had the idea that if we networked all of our brains, we would lose the experience of a separate self, but I'm like, wouldn't that maybe just make us psychotic because you're not ready for it?
That's the same experience.
And so all of a sudden, you know, but yeah, so I think that there may be some ways to use technology that would be really helpful. I mean, that's already happening. So yeah, I think to maybe, as psychologists, to try and think through some of the consequences and to maybe make recommendations for, like, this might actually be helpful for humans considering the fullness of their experience, and this might actually create problems in, I mean, you know, we can even destroy our ability to have consciousness at all. We don't know. What happens if we increase our intelligence 1,000 times? Can we even handle that?
We are out of time, yeah.